With every wave of Israeli aggression on Palestinians, icons emerge. Like Uncle Khalid captured on video kissing the eyes of his granddaughter, telling us that she is Ruh al-Ruh, the soul of his soul. Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old girl trapped in a car beside the bodies of her family, we heard her voice pleading with a rescue worker, please help me, please someone come help me. And Rifat al-Ariri, the poet, the writing teacher, who once said that if an Israeli soldier broke into his home, he would fight them with an expo marker.
Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if they target us, charge at us, open door to door to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers.
These names, these faces, the voices, they haunt us. But there were many before them, names some of us have already forgotten. And I keep asking myself, why does it matter to remember them? What happens when we stop telling their stories? And finally, how can we preserve those stories before they disappear? Let's get started. Why does it matter that we remember them at all? Remember the faces, their stories. And I want you to realize something. Colonialism, apartheid, genocide, they are systems of narrative. They depend on our forgetfulness, or at the very least, our exhaustion. I mean, I live in New York City, and which is a land that was once inhabited by indigenous people called the Lenape. These territories stretch across, modern day New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. But today, you can live your whole life in New York City, spend 12 years of education, and not even know the name. Why? Because the erasure wasn't just violent. It was narrative based. Their stories were not preserved by them. The colonizers, the missionaries, and the settlers were the ones who passed down the selective stories that they wanted to share. And over time, these stories became flatter, safer, more convenient, and even at this point, more politically correct. The real history, the complexity, the loss, the resistance, the genocide got buried. But when we remember stories of individuals by name, we interfere with that process. We disrupt the erasure. The memory becomes more like a cultural resistance than a simple memory that we can pass down from generation to another. And this is why Rifat al-Arir believed that stories are meant to be told and retold. Because repetitions is a survival. Because if we don't tell them, someone else will. And when they will, it will be untrue or misguided. So what happens when we stop telling their stories? You would think that if you stop telling the story of, for example, Hind Rajab, it will, get lost in the archive of blogs and newspapers and get lost in the algorithm. Therefore, it will cease to exist. However, that's not what actually happens. Remember, systems of oppressions are built on narrative. So these stories don't just disappear. They get replaced with another story. And usually it's a story that is more convenient for the powerful. I remember when I was 6 or 7 watching TV with my dad in our living room in Yemen, and a 12-year-old kid came on screen. He was crouching behind his father, and they were hiding behind some sort of concrete barrel or concrete thing. And they were beside a road, and you can see that there were bullets flying and hitting the wall that's behind them. And the two were trying to shield themselves from gunfire during clashes between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian gunmen. And you can see the father waving frenetically for help while bullets are striking behind him, and the boy is crying out, and he was just fighting for his life. And I can never forget the pure terror that I saw in the kid's face. And moments later, you can see a boy just slumped against his father, and the father is barely conscious. The kid's name was Muhammad al-Durra. His father was Jamal al-Durra, and it was September 30th, 2000. And it was at the beginning of the second intifada in Gaza. And Muhammad al-Durra was killed that day. The incident was captured by a journalist, a French journalist, and it was aired in France TV. The image of Muhammad al-Durra's final moment became an iconic picture. It was painted everywhere, it became a banner in protest, and it was referenced in poetry. And Israeli officials even initially admitted of killing Muhammad al-Durra, calling it unintentional collateral damage. But as the international community grew in criticism of Israel and its killing a child, at different times The Israeli government claimed Muhammad was still alive in hiding. Other times they blamed the Palestinian gunmen. And at some point, they literally suggested the entire scene had been staged. Just imagine if we didn't have footage of the incident. This is why it matters that we retell about Palestinian stories. I am very sure there was a Muhammad al-Durra in the Lenape, but no one wrote about him. So the story was replaced by the claim that the Dutch in 1626 purchased New York City for like 60 gliders. And what we get is what we are told. So then the question becomes, how can we preserve their stories? And here I want to say that our primary responsibility is to document. And this means just saving everything, their names, their dates, archive footage, screenshots of testimonies or tweets, download interviews before they are lost on whatever platform that gets replaced by the platform that they live in right now, translate what you can translate. And I know if you're watching this video, you're probably on the artistic side part of the spectrum and you think documenting is a little cold. But documentation is the raw memory. Art is what turns that memory into something that people can connect to or feel. You might not be able to upload files to the digital archive or log in casualty numbers, but art we create relies on those documents. I can't write this video about Hind Rajab or Uncle Khalid or Rafat Al-Arir if someone did not record their videos and their voices or interview them on their news cable or channel. I can't tell the story of Muhammad al-Durra if that French channel did not capture that footage and spread it everywhere and fought for it to survive or stay online. And you have to remember that what we can't prove opens the room for it to get denied, and what we can archive and save, it gets re-narrated. The second thing that we can do is create. And that's where most of us can shine in our all different artistic endeavors. We can write poems, create films, portraits, podcasts, street murals, short stories, and do not downplay the power of fiction or even creating TikTok videos or YouTube videos. What matters isn't the medium, is the story that has a form, some sort of shape that can pause people's day for a minute or even a few seconds so that they can remember that these people once existed and are not lost. And finally, the last thing that we can do is we can teach. This is where memories move beyond just crying about the people that we lost. When you teach a story, you plant it in someone else. Whether it's in a classroom, a group chat, or at dinner table, you make that story part of someone else's worldview. You make it harder to be erased, harder to spin around and make it something else, and harder to ignore. And when we hear the word teach, we think a classroom and a chalkboard. But this is not the case. Teaching just means for us to be intentional about sharing the stories that we already know. Tell a story and tell it again and again until their names become on college campuses, in halls or rooms in our classrooms, and even carried by our own children. And that's how stories travel beyond space and time. And I want to say in conclusion, in his famous poem, Rafat Al-Arir says, "If I must die, you must live to tell my story." So their stories will not survive on their own. They survive because someone chooses to carry them. Maybe that someone is you. So if you are an artist, a poet, a filmmaker, a writer, use what you have. The question is, what will you do with what you now know?